On my signal, I got the horn section to play Love Roller Coaster by the Ohio Players.
Kevin, you're such a disease.
And then you do things together. You swim, you row, you boat, you eat, you think. Yeah.
I gotta get a soda. All right. I'm sorry, Mr. P. I'm having a party on Saturday night if you really want to go.
This is Michael C. Maronna, and you're listening to the Weencast podcast.
Weencast, a Ween podcast with Shane and Rory.
Well, the summer was upon Rory and I once again. The electricity had become so loud we could barely hear ourselves think. Our shadows had shrunk to virtually nothing, and our downhill ice block races had resulted in nothing but a couple of numb butts. Nothing could beat the heat for us at this point. Not a blue tornado bar, a bona fide sludge sickle, or something covered in pineapple blurt. Trying to avoid the killer bees from the Yucatan Peninsula, we turned to Wellsville's firstborn son, member of the McAllister family, and longtime Ween fan, Michael C. Maronna, for help. Michael loaded us up in the Wrigley family's 1978 Cutlass Supreme and schooled us on how he got into Ween, his first Ween show, which out of sheer fate was the night before our first Ween show on the 12 Golden Country Greats tour in 1996, and about attending other Ween shows in some of the other Big Apple venues. In addition to Ween, we talk about Michael's podcast with his TV brother Danny Tamborelli, The Adventures of Danny and Mike, his current career behind the camera, and of course the legacy of one of the best television shows of all time, Pete and Pete. Please check out our Patreon for more of our conversation with Mike, including his experiences on the Home Alone movies, the elusive and highly sought-after film credit known as High School Confidential, and tons of other fun stories. All of our patrons will receive our podcast stickers and have access to all of our exclusive content, including full episodes, clips, and writings. Patreon.com/Weencastpodcast. Don't forget, there is still time to enter the Weencast Summer Spectacular Ween Fan Story Contest. Please send your best Ween stories to us via Wave, MP3, or video file to weencastpodcast@gmail.com. It could be anything that has to do with you and Ween, how you got into them, something that happened to you at a Ween show, or something to do with listening to the albums. Whatever story you want to tell. Entries are valid until Labor Day, September 7th, and all entries should be 5 minutes or less. You will not only win bragging rights, but also a handmade Boognish and Blazing cutting board by West Brandywine Woodworks out of Philadelphia. Please check them out on Facebook, Instagram, and Etsy. Please enjoy the Michael interview and subscribe to the Adventures of Danny and Mike wherever you get your podcasts. Enjoy.
Hello, all you Ween heads and Weencast listeners. This is Travis from West Brandywine Woodworks in Chester County, Pennsylvania. At West Brandywine Woodworks, we specialize in items for the home like cutting boards, serving trays, shelving, and pretty much anything else you can think of. We are very excited to be a part of the first ever Weencast Summer Spectacular Ween Fan Story Contest, where you, the listener, have the opportunity to tell your craziest, gnarliest, or brownest Ween-related stories to the guys at Weencast for a chance to win a limited edition, handmade, Boognish branded cutting board made by yours truly. So what are you waiting for? Record your story and submit it already, before it's too late. And don't forget to give West Brandywine Woodworks a like and a follow on Instagram and Facebook. Boognish lives!
Okay, so we are on the phone with Mike Maronna. Mike, we want to say right off the bat, thank you so much for being with us tonight. This is great. Been looking forward to this for a long time.
Oh, sure. Thanks, Weencast, for having me.
Yeah, and I also just want to say thank you, too, as well. It's really an honor and a privilege to get to chat it up about Ween with you.
Okay. That's what we're really there to do, is to paint the town brown. So
we've listened to your podcast, Danny and Adventures of Danny and Mike, on and off for the last, I guess it's been about 7 years now or so. You've been doing the podcast. Am I right?
It's if it's not 7, it's 6+.
So, I mean, I knew early on in your podcast that, you were a Ween fan because it seemed like you just kept bringing it up like little hints here and there. And I'm like, oh, okay, Mike must be a fan, like that's awesome,
In Seltzer King Studios, Danny and Jeremy are both, pretty good musicians. I am not there, but when we're over there recording, sometimes there would be 2 guitars hanging around at least. So sometimes we would break into some Ween songs just organically.
Cool. That's cool. Well, can you?
What kind of songs do you like? Did you guys cover?
I think it would just little bits would happen, but I'm sure I tried to play Baby Bitch and various things off of Chocolate and Cheese. There were a lot of work. Ween just seemed to like have this relationship, I guess, to the band, the podcast, because they're a New Jersey band and Danny is a New Jersey person.
Okay, yeah, that fits.
Even though New Hope, PA is not in New Jersey, Pork Roll.
Well, Lambertville's across the river.
Exactly, and we've heard this legend of the Ween deep sea fishing tour. Is this a thing?
Oh yes.
I don't know where you guys record the pod from, but is it feasible for you to go deep sea fishing with Gene Ween? Because maybe we could double up. We could do a crossover episode.
I would drive wherever the heck I need to go to make that.
Yeah, same here.
Allegedly, it's South Jersey by the Wooter. Out there by the Wooter.
Well, can you?
Well, we're both Pennsylvania boys. I'm in Virginia now, but we're both Pennsylvania boys.
Gotcha. Love the Cabela's on 78.
Oh, nice.
Probably take some hostages in there. Such a scary spot. Like you could shoot a whole. I think you should shoot a whole Western in there.
Yeah,
we should. That's a great idea.
There's this comedian, Mark Malkoff, who does these sort of like gimmick things where he goes to every Starbucks, or he lives in IKEA, or he does sort of like corporate comedy. He's also done like other kind of comedy stunts and stuff like that, but it sounds like something that would be right up his alley.
That sounds awesome. Well, let's go back in terms of you being a fan. Do you have a memory of like the first time you ever heard Ween?
Yeah. It was I think it was 94, and I read a review of Chocolate and Cheese in the paper somewhere.
Wow, that's awesome.
I said it was the free paper. It was not The Voice. It was the New York Press, which was this other like newspaper box for free paper that you could get anywhere downtown. It just had a lot of listings at that time and had some fucked up comics and stuff like that I enjoyed. But I really didn't pay attention often to the music writing. But this album review just seemed right on, and so I gave it a shot. I think that was the first. Yeah, Chocolate and Cheese, and I worked my way backwards.
So you just read a review and just went and bought the CD yourself?
Yeah, is that weird?
What did the review say about Ween that like you just had to go out and buy that album?
That is a good question. I think it was the way that they described each of the songs happening in these different styles.
That's a really cool story, though, because I mean, I think that every Ween fan right away wants to hear the story about, oh, it was this dude that I knew that, turned me on to them, and it was a real struggle for him to explain it to me, and, blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? It's always that sort of like you trying to get somebody else into it kind of thing, but you just did it on your own.
I want to say it happened that way, and I want to say that it was the New York Press album review. I don't think it was the Village Voice, but it was a free paper. And based on that, I just kind of went with it.
That's cool, man. That's cool. And so it was just like love at first listen?
I mean, sure, the album cover was provocative, and that was that helps.
It's hanging on my wall, baby. It's hanging on my wall.
It has some, it does double duty as like a mom warrior.
Yeah, right.
As far as the Teenage Rebellion, so that was helpful.
Yeah. It was also kind of dirty.
But I believe it has the explicit lyrics.
It had a sticker. Oh, it had a sticker on it. Yeah, that's true. It was appealing.
So, how big of a Ween head would you consider yourself?
What's a scale? It's like immeasurable. You can't measure. I've seen Ween a few times.
About how many times have you seen them?
I have seen them in single digits. I'm not going to say I've seen them in double digits. I've seen them less than 10 times.
All right, that's still pretty good.
All the shows in like the New York, New Jersey area, or have you ever traveled to see them?
No, I don't think I've seen them anywhere else. It was just a few shows. I've seen them at Tramps. Seen them at like Mercury. Anyway, there were a few places around town, and there's that aspect of being a Ween head, and then there's also listening to the albums, keeping up with the really sick web design of the web page, because I mean that was a draw in the late 90s and early 2000s for sure.
Oh yeah, man, totally.
That's something we talk about on our podcast from time to time, is how they were actually cutting edge with technology during that time period when it was a huge transition in the 90s and early 2000s, and they were somehow at the forefront of all that.
Do you have any insight as to why that is?
Well, I think they just were really, were really like ahead of their time when it came to.
I'm sorry to interrupt. It's just our impression is like, 8 tracks laying down the pod or something like that. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah, totally. I think Diener's always been someone who, will grab onto as much as he can to produce something. Back in the day, it's like the 8-track because that's what they had because they were down and dirty. But as they grew and there was more money and more, opportunity to kind of shoot for the moon, I think Diener's someone who just goes for it.
Yeah, and I mean, I think they just, in the early days of like the internet, it was sort of like, well, this is how we can appeal directly to like our people. You know what I mean? And it was just, they did a really good job of, sort of like cultivating that following that would be, that they, that they had and that they wanted. Just like, okay, these are going to be the people that we're going to like appeal to anyway. We want to get this stuff out to them, and we don't have to worry about getting on the charts and any of that kind of bullshit. So they were kind of like ahead of their time when it came to getting it straight to like the fan, The
pipeline.
Yeah, right. Pipeline, So let's go back a little bit. So what was the first show? Now we asked you this already, so we know the answer to this, but what was the first show that you saw them?
I want to say it was, I think I gave you a date on it in 1996. I kind of took my time getting to see that. I think it was it late October of 1996?
Yeah, so Tramps.
Yeah, you'd mentioned Tramps.
Crap. I don't think Tramps exists anymore, and that's a good place. I saw it. KRS-One play there. Frank Black, bunch of Betty Severe. Saw a few different rock bands there, and
that's awesome.
It had these crazy pillars that you could get, and that you would end up getting pinned against if you didn't get out of the way when stuff started rocking.
Or have the misfortune of standing behind and having your view blocked.
Oh, these were massive. These were like, structural things that you would not hesitate to put one of your X-Men next to if you thought that things were going down.
So
the show was October 26th. 1996. Do you remember if it was the early or the late show?
The fall air was crisp, and I want to say that it was the late show because the Yankees won one of the games of the World Series while they were playing the show, and
Okay.
and it was announced on stage. So I want to say that the baseball game happened later at night.
So can you tell us anything that you remember?
Throw me some set list. Throw me some set list stuff.
Oh shit.
Well, yeah, man, I got the set list right here for the late show. You know,
I figured you might.
And I don't think Shane actually mentioned this to you yet, but an amazing thing is that our first show is actually the very next day in Philadelphia.
So you saw them on the 12 Golden Country Greats tour?
Yeah, man. Yeah, dude.
With Claude in the band, then.
It was the country band, but but yeah, dude. So it's the day after. So actually, our set list is almost exactly the same as yours. But here, man, let me read the set list for you. So this is the late show, October 26, 1996. I would be remiss not to first mention that Do-Rag opened, which was awesome because they opened for us the next day, and so I want to talk about Do-Rag.
I lucked into these tickets by virtue of the fact that Dave Martell, who played Teddy on The Adventures of Pete and Pete,
yes, Teddy,
recurring character, who was a PA kid as well, had a paoli.
Nice.
You know, Philly suburbs kid.
Yeah.
Nice guy. Ended up going to Fordham after Pete and Pete was over, and we had finished just at the very end of '95, and so Dave was in his year of college and knew that I liked Ween and offered me these tickets because I want to say his freshman year roommate's uncle was in that country band that was backing Ween.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
So we got invited backstage after the show. But go ahead, and I'll give you a little story about that afterwards. But if you had something, Do-Rag was just, that was a good refresher. I mean, Ween kind of like prepares you for guys maybe doing fucked up things to the microphone, but like Do-Rag sort of like blew the expectations off of that before Ween even got on the stage.
Dude, I didn't even know what to make of that. He did the whole thing with like a space helmet on. Something.
You remember. And so I said just for a second, I said to myself, maybe this is something from out of the pod because there's that weird photograph on the cover.
Right.
And then I said, no, there's always two of them. This is a solo guy. This is definitely rough, down and dirty. This is Do-Rag. It's not the other guys. It's not the guys you came to see. And meanwhile, I had been sort of getting into wrapping my head around all the Golden Country greats after sort of this, big stylistic break with Chocolate and Cheese.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you had heard the country album going to the show, or you didn't know it was going to be like a country band's show that night?
I'm not sure what the how the stage was set, but I know that I got that album sometime in '96, so I probably had heard it before.
Yeah, I think for us it was kind of like we had definitely heard the country album, but we didn't know going to the show in Philadelphia that it was going to be like a whole country band.
Right.
Yeah, when you saw the whole country band up there, like what were your thoughts, because you're reconciling this new album with the first album, not the first, but the first album you listened to, Chocolate and Cheese.
I didn't know a whole bunch of country, and I was apprehensive, but you do end up toe tapping by the end of the first song. It was, they probably started. Did they start with Japanese Cowboy?
They start with the HIV song.
Ooh.
Japanese Cowboy was third.
And what was the second track?
So you got HIV song, Don't Shit Where You Eat, and then Japanese Cowboy.
So Don't Shit Where You Eat, is a lot of Chocolate and Cheese. It's like it's foreboding. it's menacing, but it also stylistically it points you towards their country stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. It absolutely does. It kind of bleeds into it a little bit.
And with Don't Get Too Close to My Fantasy starting with a similar sort of rambly. No, you could that maybe that was played on a 12 string or something like that. Stylistically, sometimes they point you towards the medieval or the classical as opposed to the old timey country. In other just one-off tracks.
Totally.
So their chameleon-like nature, I should have, realized was part of the deal when I got there that time.
Right. Well, should we do the whole set list from that show?
Yeah, let me run down that. So we got HIV Song, Don't Shit Where You Eat, Japanese Cowboy, going into Chariots of Fire, Piss Up a Rope, Mr. Richard Smoker, Pumpin' for the Man, I Saw Jeaner Crying in His Sleep, Baby Bitch, Spinal Meningitis, The Stallion Part 3, She Fucks Me, I Can't Put My Finger on It, The Blarney Stone. And just thinking about that with the country band is pretty awesome. Help Me Scrape the Mucus Off My Brain, I'll Be Your Johnny on the Spot, Poop Ship Destroyer, I'm Holding You, Big Jim, Freedom is 76, Buenos Tardes Amigo, and Dr. Rock.
You'll notice that they came back to the older stuff to finish off. They gave us the hits because that was what we came for. Even though you did get a good, healthy serving of the country album.
Oh yeah, I mean that's one of the coolest things about the country tour. And a couple of the country shows that they've played in the last few years, because they did do not a whole tour with the country band again, but I think it was like 2-3 shows in a row, is the fact that like they have the whole country band with them, but they play a lot of just the regular Ween songs. And that's one of the coolest things about, that whole tour. It's just, it's just great.
It's also, they never come close to playing that many Golden Country Great songs at any other shows.
Oh, definitely not.
So this truly was like that moment where, this is when they played the Golden Country Greats. They only play but 1 or 2 of them per show usually now.
Interesting.
Well,
but yes, so as far as that's the set list. What anything stand out to you before we get to we want to talk about the backstage story, but as far as the show, anything stand out to you? Any particular songs or jams or anything that stood out to you as your first show?
I should refer back to the set list that I sent you. So crap, I just sent you a screenshot instead of the link. I only knew. I mean, a lot of slurs jump out in there. You know what I mean? Being able to say all of those words real quick, even when Ween sings them real quick, was very liberating in that time. It felt very punk.
Okay.
And they're just such unlikely subject matter for the Golden Country songs. The intention of Ween to just sort of get you out of nowhere, usually with their other albums, seen stylistically they approach it different ways, maybe like from the point of view of the Amigo in Buenos Tardes Amigo, or the Stallion. Clearly you are the Stallion. Right? They're willing, like Voodoo Lady for me was really, took you somewhere else but that also had the advantage of being on an MTV show. I think it was on the State sketch or something.
Totally,
like that
man.
Early on, it was used as backing, music, which I encountered later on, but I did. That was probably my first video audio encounter together of Ween. I don't think I did much like researching of them in the internet in that era.
Right.
So probably MTV via the State was the first time I heard Ween in front of some video, even though it was a state and it wasn't something that Ween did.
Yeah, it wasn't one of their videos, right?
Nice state reference too.
There would there's some kids who were willing to go all over stylistically.
Right.
I think Ween, you saw like in individual tracks there were totally different approaches, whereas they went for it pretty hard on 12 Golden Country Greats and on that tour. Whereas it took me years and years later, probably needed some therapy and I didn't get it, to get into the Mollusk really hard and to hear that stuff. And to think about, what if they played that on the country tour?
Well, let's hold off on the other albums for a minute, but so what's everything that you can remember from that first show? So you said you had a story.
Oh, singing along with the songs that I already knew by heart from Chocolate and Cheese.
Okay.
And from Pure Guava. I didn't know too many songs off the pod, and they didn't play. I didn't know anything. I don't think they played any tracks off Gone Weed and Satan. If I remember that.
No, they did not.
That set list you said. So I'm a Met fan, so I didn't particularly give a shit that the Yankees were winning in the World Series. But they did stop the show at one point to announce that, and I was like, oh, okay.
That allowed you to focus more on the show.
Having fun. I mean, Fordham is in the Bronx, so I'm sure it was important to Dave's roommates and some other pals that came that night.
Yeah,
right. To the show.
Right.
Even though if you think about Ween's fan base, it would probably be the filthiest of all people, the Philadelphia Philly.
Yeah,
fans.
with a P, right.
You would assume that there would be some regional whatever about it, but it didn't really, I don't think it registered much that night.
Right.
So, yeah, we got, because we knew Dave and Dave's roommate's uncle was playing. I think he was the lap steel player. I think that was his
Stu Basori? Stu Basori?
Stu Basori?
I'm pretty sure that's his name.
Was there also a pedal steel player in addition to a lap steel player on that?
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure who's playing what.
So, yeah, he played a stringed instrument is what I want to say. And we were, the green room at Tramps wasn't anything much. I think it was right there past the stage. And I remember they had Entenmann's Donuts, which I immediately cleaned Ween out of.
Nice.
Chocolate
flavors?
Chocolate frosted, bro. Are you kidding? I went for the good shit.
Nice. Did they have mushrooms? Were they from Safeway?
I did not look for anything. Like, my instinct was not to grab for, I don't know, illegal drugs or anything like that. I didn't really see that going on. It was more like I saw a guitar pick on the floor. It was loud in there and drunk and sticky and all that, but I saw a guitar. I was like, went and grabbed this guitar pick off the floor.
That's awesome.
Completely plain and unremarkable. Like, all the print had probably already been worn off of that guitar pick. And who even knew if it came from Ween or if it had been left there from another band? But I got it at that time in that place. So.
Well, yeah, and you know that you got it that night, so that's your souvenir from that, first time you saw Ween. So that's fucking cool, man.
That's awesome, dude. In memoriam forever.
I was psyched. I went back to Tramps a few more times. It was just like never gonna win in where it was in New York City. It was just ended up getting redeveloped. Everything over there got redeveloped, so it couldn't last as a rock club. But there were some very good shows there while it lasted.
Right. It's
some low ceilings, which is not what you see these days, as contrasted to the last place I saw Ween.
It's kind of funny because you had, I had said you had let us know the other day that was your first show. So I was doing a little bit of digging on Brown Bass, and not only were there 2 shows at Tramps that night, but there were 2 shows earlier that year in the summer, where it looks like they had played the country show as well. Again, 2 shows in the same night. And then there's a gap. So that was in July. and then there's a gap, and then the actual country tour, it started like at the beginning of October.
No, I misremembered it because you're talking about July of 1996, correct?
So they did 2 shows in July at Tramps in the same night. And then, so I don't know if that was sort of like a precursor to the entire country tour. Like, let's see if we can actually get this whole thing together, and then we'll try it for like this fall. And I don't know that that's how it went down, but I never knew that until going back and, just looking at the shows from Tramps and the other like shows from that year.
And how does the set list compare from that July show?
It's definitely got the country tour items.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's very similar. I didn't compare them, the 2 nights, but I'm sure it's really close, But yeah, it's just an interesting little tidbit that, not only did they play 2 shows at Tramps that night, but they played 2 shows at Tramps in the middle of summer. So it's not even part of the country tour, but just something I never knew until I went back and looked over the shows for that year.
There must be a story somewhere in there, 4 times at the 4 shows in the same venue in 1 year.
Yeah.
And then it closed. No, not that year. They did just fine.
Ween tore him down.
It was a good, loud, hot, squat place. Yeah.
That's cool, man. Classic Ween shit.
Like I said, as opposed to the last show I saw, which was out in this newer place called Brooklyn Steel out here in close to my neighborhood in Brooklyn.
Yeah, you mentioned that in one of your podcasts, and so let's contrast that. So how was it different? How is Brooklyn Steel?
Well, Dan Tamborelli, I think, put me onto that, or maybe we had egged each other on to going to the show, so we both ended up going. He went with a friend whose birthday it was, I think, and I ended up getting there independently with a buddy from the neighborhood who's been a Ween fan for a while. And it's a place that what was the rumor? It's the same ownership as a larger club on the west side called Terminal 5, which is just a lot of big, just sheet metal and a lot of big speakers, a lot of high ceilings, and the sight lines are
Yeah, we've been to Terminal 5, so we're familiar with
you have been to Terminal 5. Okay, I'm trying to remember what I saw there. It was a New Year's Eve show of Google Bordello, so you can understand it was kind of a haphazard thing, and I haven't been up north. In Terminal 5, no, I've seen a couple shows there, but I've always been on the ground floor. I haven't gone up in the balconies, whereas for this Ween show, we managed to get a little bit upstairs for Brooklyn Steel and scope out a good spot because the ground floor was really stuffed for what was billed as an evening with Ween.
Did it fulfill its billing?
It was an evening with Ween. I cheaped out and didn't get a t-shirt. I was like, t-shirt's $30. No way. And I ended up getting a Ween flag instead.
Nice.
Oh, okay, yeah. I've seen your the shots of you, I guess, recording your podcast via Zoom, and the Ween flag is in the background. The pirate.
That's it.
Yeah. Okay.
That's it. Yeah, I got it on that tour.
That's cool.
And that was a really great show. I feel like he did rock through a lot of hits, and there was some really great guitar playing. They took the time, and the band was extremely tight. And they did some good covers too. They did a Bowie cover, and what was the other cover? Gosh, but they did a David Bowie cover, which was good.
That's awesome, man.
We were in a spot where I would complain about the sightlines ordinarily, but it worked out.
Yeah, we've only been to Terminal 5, which I know is a different, layout, like you were saying, but we've only been there once, and unfortunately, we got stuck pretty high up. I think we might have been on the highest tiers, like the third tier, and our view was not.
You're beyond Thunderdome up there. You should be like should be swinging a chain, and maybe it's like a drippy, like an oily gasoline chain, and which does work for certain Ween songs like "Pumpin' for the Man," for example.
Yeah, right.
But you don't.
Well, and I'm certain I saw someone doing it.
So we were far away to kind of like watch them noodle out to watch Gene noodle out on the Stallion and a couple of things that they played, but they fully went for it and took their time and really went through it. So I appreciated what I got.
That's cool, man.
I'm looking at the set list from your show.
Go ahead.
And
what do you got? What do you got for me?
We don't have to. I'm just going through some of the highlights. Among His Tribe from Quebec. It was the first time it was ever played. That's pretty baller.
Do you have a favorite album, and what would you consider to be your favorite versus what you think would be their best? Is it the same, or is it two different things?
Ooh, so subjective, right?
However you want to lay it out.
I mean, sure, I fell in love with the sense memory of any band is the youngest you are the first time you contact it, because it's obviously the most uncorruptible you are when you first encounter them.
Right.
And the stylistic range of Chocolate and Cheese, while still being like dedicated to being profane and punk and ignorant and just like unknowable to me, so foreign. Even though, they are obviously just some guys from, a couple hundred miles away, not even. Mm-hmm. It's always, but my favorite album is probably the Mollusk.
Okay.
Nice.
I think they showed a lot of range, and, you can say this and that about different recording situations and record companies and how their relationship was, but I really liked the naive feeling of Chocolate and Cheese, when I first encountered it. But, my rookie year of Ween. But my most favorite album would be the Mollusk.
Nice, dude.
Nice. Yeah, I kind of go, we had a episode of podcast where we talk about our favorite episodes, and basically those two end up being like, we don't answer it definitively. We kind of have the top three. But those are always like the two for me that can kind of go back and forth.
A buddy
thing I really love.
I apologize. A buddy was nice enough to share a link to, was it on Pitchfork, of an oral history from the two of them of how they made the Mollusk album. Mm-hmm. They rented a place in the shore and all that shit.
Right.
Yeah. Yep. Down the shore. Yep.
You were saying. Please continue.
I don't remember what I was saying anymore.
I'm a derailer. I apologize.
It's all cool. It's all good. No worries.
Fuck.
The Mollusk. So, just one of the things I appreciated about the Mollusk that contrasts it with Chocolate and Cheese a little bit is how, like, thematic it is. I mean, people call it a concept album, which is partly true. They didn't intend it that way. But it is thematically, like, really pure. Even though there's still stylistic differences throughout the album,
right? There's
still like this theme that goes through the whole thing.
They elaborate on a theme,
and it's really
there's no tracks I want to skip. There's no tracks I want to skip anywhere on the album.
Definitely not.
And so that to me is like, if I'm thinking like, how do I distinguish these two albums? That's something I come back to, is that the Mollusk is as far as being an album, right? I mean, like the art of making an album is kind of dying. But as far as, I think about Pink Floyd albums, right? And it's like how they all kind of very coherent. And so the Mollusk is very coherent, whereas Chocolate and Cheese, it still has a lot of those stylistic differences, but it's not quite as coherent. It feels more like a collection of great songs versus an album, if that makes sense.
Well, it's a lot of songs. You're getting your money's worth on Chocolate and Cheese.
Yeah, no, and I'll second what you're saying about kind of I don't know, naughtiness or whatever. Like, it's amazing that you get a song like the HIV song, and then you also have Tears for Eddie, and it's like,
sure. And I didn't even know about Parliament Funkadelic at that point. Like, I still needed to be introduced into Maggot Brain and that sort of style. After that, so Ween's interpretation of it, I heard first. Unfortunately,
totally, me too.
That's just the way I encountered it in that order.
Oh yeah, I mean, I hadn't heard any of that sort of like funk, or I never had gotten into Prince or anything. All that stuff that was that they were like influenced by until well after I got into Ween. I mean, definitely.
And it helps to see where they're coming from.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
So would you say...
So we talk about...
Go ahead, Rick.
I was just going to say, talking about the albums, and saying, Chocolate and Cheese, the Mollusk. One of the things, that we've touched on is that Ween has all these different styles, and the albums are that way. Like, every album is really different from the next. So besides, kind of saying, the Mollusk is my favorite, Chocolate and Cheese is the best. How do you feel, how do you wrestle with all the different styles of all the albums? Like, how do you take that on?
That, I had a theory when I was younger. I don't know if it bears out that, but I would say if I was like, yeah, I'm listening to it. I tried to say, I was like, Ween exists to poke fun at genres of music and to say we can dismantle this, we can laugh at this, we can do this earnestly.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that dichotomy.
Like that, something very honest, like A Tear for Eddie, like you're talking about. But also Buenos Tardes Amigos on the same album. So, which if you think about it, at that point, people are, what do you call it? Pulp Fiction is out that year. People are being, that type of, it's a very cinematic song. It's a super cinematic song.
Postmodern as well. Like Ween is fantastically.
And that whole album.
Example of postmodernism. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, sir.
Oh, I was just, in terms of pulp, you mentioned Pulp Fiction, and that just made me think about the 90s and kind of the epitome of postmodern culture. And Ween is a great example of that.
Because they're conscious of what they're doing. They're looking at you and they're winking.
Yeah, and deconstructing it, and, you mentioned Buenos Tardes Amigo, and what's amazing about that song is that song, not only does an album have songs that are parodies and songs that are serious, but Buenos Tardes Amigo is like both at the same time.
It's a sequel to Carne Asada.
Oh, nice.
It's a sequel to Pollo Asada? I don't think so.
Is that your fan theory? Is that your fan theory?
If you are crediting them with enough, linearity and coherence to weave together a concept of an album, could they not weave several threads over several albums?
Anything's possible when the Boognish is in charge.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't see why not. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Whether intentional or not.
What kind of what aspects of Ween, what styles of Ween are your favorite? Like, what parts of Ween appeal to you the most? Deep questions, man. We're hitting you hard.
Like, do you prefer like that hard rocking type Ween, or like you mentioned, like Voodoo Lady, like a little bit more of like that funk, or some of like the slower country, like Lounge Lizard type stuff? What's your favorite like style?
I think the falsetto white boy of Freedom of 76 was probably the defining part of my introduction of Chocolate and Cheese.
Okay.
But then then on the same wavelength, you had, on completely 180, you had like the emotionally wounded boy through line of Baby Bitch or Birthday Boy, basically the same song. On Birthday Boy's on Pure Guava, right? He's
God Ween Satan.
Birthday Boy's God Ween Satan, but Baby Bitch mentions Birthday Boy.
That's what you know what I mean. They're basically the same song. They can weave these threads of the like wounded misogynist.
Yeah.
Maybe that there's a danger in the Ween fandom in that way, I think, and we got to keep ourselves in check.
That seems very true. That's you hit the nail right on the head, I would say, with that one.
Indeed.
I mean, even in the 90s, they were from a different. They were using styles from a different era. You know what I mean? They weren't trying to do. They were looking back as they. I'm not sure what I'm trying to say. Exactly.
No, you're right on. I mean, that's one of the things we've talked about a bunch of times on our show is, I mean, just our conversation right now, we're talking about a show from 1996 followed by a show from 2017. And I mean, any Ween fan will tell you both of those shows are great shows. It doesn't matter. It doesn't get like dated.
Only one of those shows did I see nitrous oxide tanks outside of, though, on the sidewalk. And that was the one in my neighborhood that I rode my bike home from. And I had never seen that before at a rock show in general. I guess I haven't been going to the right rock shows, or those type of shows aren't in Greenpoint, or...
Maybe you haven't been going to the wrong rock shows.
Whatever it was, I had not gone to shows and seen something like that before. So that was a little something to see on the sidewalks of New York.
But I mean, it's like the music is so diverse that it doesn't really get like dated as like a 90s thing, and people still want to go see them, and there's still kids getting into them even after all these years because it doesn't have like a,
Unfortunately, if it's Voodoo Lady, it does get just because it's like set in a soundtrack for you. If that was something that was in a movie ever, or Voodoo Lady because of the MTV thing, or
yeah, you can't help but think of that.
Right, and
yeah, there's a couple songs where they kind of just almost touch like superstardom,
Drifter in the Dark could have easily been on 12 Golden Country Grades, but it works just as well on Chocolate and Cheese because it starts with the same flavor as Don't Shit Where You Eat But Go Somewhere Else.
That's very true. That's very true.
Yeah, totally. Well, and that speaks also to the sort of the way they approach albums. Some of the songs come up sort of organically as they're working on the album, but they also have a huge backlog, right? And so a lot of those songs, weren't necessarily written right before Chocolate or Golden Country Grades, or the Mollusk or White Pepper. Some of those songs are songs they've had in their back pocket for years.
So they're trying to emulate Prince in that way. Like you could look at them another, as sort of being really impressed by Prince and trying to emulate him in some ways, but they don't sound like that as religious as he does.
Totally, man.
I couldn't know I was gonna have a baby and sing "Cold Blows the Wind" to him as a lullaby to try and lull him to sleep.
No, nice.
Yeah, we do the same.
It was in that time.
That's a sweet lullaby.
It was in that time when he was like learning words, and I could get him to finish each line.
Excellent.
That's cool, man.
Of the song. I'm not sure how much. I haven't sung it for him in a while, so I'm not sure how much he would know now. But we still do listen to a lot of music. But really not as much Ween. It's interesting.
Yeah, I have 5-year-old twin boys and a baby girl. And the song for me was always "It's Gonna Be All Right." That was always my choice.
Sure. Well, that's a great lullaby feeling to it.
Yeah. So, we have to hit you up with a couple of Pete and Pete things if you don't mind. And you do your podcast, and usually there's a couple of Pete and Pete topics in like each episode. We're sure that you get hit up with this all the time, but what's your take on why was the whole series never like released? I mean, you got season 3 was never released on DVD. There was never any kind of Blu-ray for it, or any kind of box set of the complete series, and it seems to be sort of absent in like the streaming world, if I'm not mistaken. It doesn't really seem like you can find it anywhere except on YouTube. So what's your take on that?
Media consolidation is bad. In the time since we made the show, Viacom and CBS have spun off of each other and come back again and reunited. It's just corporate stuff that's not shouldn't have to do with anything that me and Danny, Allison, Judy, Toby, Hardy have anything to do with.
Right.
It's unfortunate because we existed in a time where crossing over to digital would have been the easiest thing to do. And we recorded commentary tracks for the third season, so it's really on big corporations.
Yeah, that's what's crazy. It seems like it's all ready to go. It's just like sitting there or whatever, and it's like, dude, get the thing out. Like, what good does it do anyone? Just, what is it supposed to be, a legend? That's no good.
Yeah, sometimes people want the idea of something more than they want the thing. That doesn't make sense. But yeah, it does. It's confusing.
Yeah, it's just a terrible shame, man. So you sort of transitioned away from acting in the mid 2000s, and we had watched an interview where you had even said you quit acting. Is that true?
I joined Local 52, which is the union for electricians, grips, props, sound, set dressing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm missing somebody in Lovey Man. Craft service and medical workers on television and film production in New York City in 2007, but I had been working on those sets since basically Pete and Pete finished. I was always sort of interested in lighting since I've been working on the show, and the gaffer of Pete and Pete gave me a shot with another job after that show finished, and I just kind of stuck with it.
Cool.
Took some time off to go to school, and then when I came back, I was continuing to act in the early 2000s until I joined the union, and just really haven't had time for it since then.
Right, and so
yeah, I saw Slackers, by the way, which I thought was cool.
Okay, one of the few, one of the proud.
No, I thought it was, dude. Underrated, man. That's great.
Thank you.
What's it like being, so sort of staying in the same industry, but being more like a fly on the wall versus actually being behind the camera? Like, what's that kind of been like?
I've had to subsume my ego. Is that the right word? It's tough to keep your mouth shut sometimes, and there's definitely a different labor dynamic there, and still protected by a union, but there's definitely a different labor dynamic. So I have, after working on sets in front of and behind the camera for a long time, moved on to rigging electric, which is not always when the actors are there. I've been working more in the setup and tear down part of production.
Okay.
Where we prepare the stage beforehand and prepare the location, and we are there during the day when the shooting electrics and the whole crew are there doing the scene, but we're also cleaning up the scene before and getting started on the next scene.
Gotcha.
So it's been a way to keep my foot in there without having the commitment to a 12 or a 14-hour production day in a lot of cases.
Well, let me go back a little bit if you don't mind. I have to say, and I know that people have said on your podcast that they consider Pete and Pete to be a great kid show, and whatnot, but I think I would just put it in my top 10 of shows of all time, and not just being a thing from when I was a kid and, oh yeah, I remember that and ha ha ha. There are a lot of other shows from my youth that I would watch a episode of and be like, yeah, that's cool to see that again. That's enough. I could pretty much watch any episode of Pete and Pete as a 40-year-old man and be thoroughly entertained the entire show.
Thank you.
It's just a completely subversive, genius program. And, this is getting really geeky, but it is kind of like Ween albums. Each episode is so diverse and so unique in and of itself. It doesn't really get dated. You know what I mean? It's just as relevant and just as good today as it was then.
The technology is catching up now, where some of those storylines could make sense again, or the technology actually to film them, whereas we did stuff super practically with not really a lot of effects.
Yeah.
maybe it would be a different story.
You know, that is kind of one of the things about watching it as an adult. And I know you've joked around in your podcast and it was made on a shoestring budget and yada yada yada. But like,
I'm sure it was very pricey just because of the shooting it on 16 millimeter film as opposed to videotape and on location as opposed to in a studio.
Oh, sure, yeah. I mean, it's not it wasn't exactly free. I'm sure, but
that's entirely what made it what it was.
Yeah, I mean, it made a lot out of very little. You know what I mean? And that's kind of one of the things about watching it as a grown up that you can sort of appreciate. You know what I mean? It's but that's part of the charm and that's part of the fun, I think.
Did you guys know it was going to be like this cool show, like when you were making it?
I don't think we did, and I don't think there was ever a meeting about it being a hit. No idea. And it was pretty much just work. People, who did different people who were on different shows on the network obviously did appearances and stuff like that, and that was very flattering. But we did like volunteer appearances as well.
I have to throw in, and I think I might speak for Rory on this one, and also our friend Corey, who was a big fan, when we were growing up. My all-time favorite moment of the entire series is when you get the horn section to play Love Roller Coaster by the Ohio Players, which attracts Artie to dance the Voodoo Crispy and the Diesel Jerk.
Sure, there were, because of my age, I didn't get a lot of the references that Will and Chris and Catherine were making in those early episodes of Pete and Pete, whether it was funk bands or the professional football players from the 60s like Art Donovan or Johnny Unitas from the 50s.
Right.
These guys, I didn't speak a lot of the same language, but these were, maybe that's why Nickelodeon was both sort of on Nick at Pete and Pete was both on Nick at Night, and Nickelodeon sort of existed in a half space where it spoke to old people and young people at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that too. And again, we've been watching a couple episodes, just getting prepared to talk to you, and it's like, I can relate to you and Danny because I was a kid and grew up just like you guys are on the show, but now I'm a dad and I have my own family and I relate to Don just as much, and I have a tractor that I love and my yard tools and all that kind of stuff. And
Shane, are you king of the road, Shane?
I'm king of fraud. Yeah, I consider myself to be king of fraud.
And you had no inkling that something like that would be important to you when you first watched the show. You had a completely different outlook.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, it has layers like an onion, except it's sweet.
It would probably be a bloomin' onion, unfortunately, if it was us.
Well, those are yummy as long as you have the right dip. Was Art so speaking of Artie, was he really the strongest man in the world? Or was that just hyperbole?
Nobody knew.
You just trying to sell records?
He never fought naked, so all the power could have been in his costume for all we know, but he was very, very strong.
That's cool. That's really all I wanted to know this whole hour.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
And I know just from listening to your podcast, that you guys get, hit up with this all the time, but, is there someone that you would say this is the most memorable guest from the show, with all the great guest stars that were on, over the years?
If we've had a chance to do it now, it's tough to think of, maybe some superstars or stuff like that could maybe outshine who we had back then. But it was an amazing lineup. It's tough to see, and I didn't even know about a few of them, whether they were, getting a crash course in the Stooges and Iggy Pop, as Dan has described, or various rockers mostly, but also some older actors that we were lucky to get that I wasn't always familiar with their work. My favorite guess was probably the conjunction of I didn't know a thing about him, the mood and our interaction and the location and everything was probably David Johansen when we did the fishing episode on Golden Beach. I think is what it was called.
Okay.
We shot it at a Boy Scout camp in Staten Island, just this very frigid, remote place that's inside the 5 boroughs. It's in New York City, but it looks like it's a sleepaway camp for a horror film or something. And and just being a teenager and sassing David Johansen, getting sass from him, and Danny sort of being in awe, but not. I didn't really know the New York Dolls. I didn't really have a punk new wave glam education at that point.
Yeah,
I was still learning in the 90s about that stuff.
Right. Yeah, it's hard. I mean, even now as a grown up, I have to sort of do like a double take, like, oh, is that the lead singer of Blondie? She's only in like one scene.
Well, that was very lucky.
Did you get to meet and work with Adam West?
He was more in Danny's plot lines, unfortunately,
right?
Because he played Danny's school principal. So I did not get to meet Adam West nor LL Cool J, unfortunately, because they were both Danny-centric plots.
Ouch!
The ultimate insult was it was rumored that we took a swing because we had already gotten Sarah Shannon and Juliana Hatfield. It was rumored that we took a swing at Frank Black and didn't get it, but we got Gordon Gano from the Violent Femmes. But it was my junior or senior year of high school, and I had to be in school that day. I didn't have any scenes scheduled for that day for some reason, or it just we didn't make it on the shooting schedule, so they just shot a cutaway of him at the front of the classroom without any of us in the shot with him. But I didn't get to meet him as well.
Oh man, ouch. Well,
bummer.
But it is the scene early on in the series with you and what is it, Captain Scrummy, aka Michael Stipe, looking for Mr. Tasty. So that's one in your cap at least.
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah. We racked up some good cameos over the years. Our director, Catherine Diekman, was a music writer and a music video director as well. Was really plugged into the indie rock scene, so we did get both Kate Pearson and Michael Stipe, so a good part of the Athens, Georgia rock scene at that point, into what we did on our summer vacation.
Yeah, that's awesome, man.
This is kind of like, Twilight. You got, oh shoot, I'm forgetting the names of the darn characters, but there's a darn werewolf and there's a darn vampire.
It's okay. I've never seen it. So.
Okay. Well, anyway, there's a whole thing about, all right, I'm going to have to cut this out. But anyway, okay. So are you Team Dean or are you Team Gene?
Oh, ooh. Yeah. I want to say they're both flawed humans, just like the fandom and the false binary of asking people to pick a side.
Oh yeah, throwing big words around.
Do we owe you an apology?
Oh, I remember hearing my younger cousins talk about Team Edward and the other team, and I understand really caring about things and caring about them. I understand caring about made up things more than real life sometimes, and I refuse to get drawn into this silly debate. I like them. I like them both. I like them both. Yeah, I like them both.
Okay.
No, and that's a perfectly great answer. Absolutely.
There's
nothing wrong with that at all.
Well, dude, hey man, we want to thank you for taking so much of your time and joining us for this tonight. This has just been a real treat and a real honor for me, Rory.
And for me. It's been nice for me too.
Oh, was that a comma or a colon in front of Rory? For me, comma, Rory.
Rory, if you want to say...
I read it like a question mark, but...
for me, I am not Shane, Rory.
Yeah, dude, and, have a great rest of your night.
It was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mike.
All right, man.
So long. You too.
No one knows who he is or where he comes from, and probably no one ever will. I guess some things are supposed to stay a mystery. All we know is that he's more than just an ice cream man. We're more than just his customers. And even though signs that summer was ending were all around us, it wasn't really that terrible at all. Thank you, Michael Maronna, for a great evening. And thank you for being on the podcast. And just like how waxing the Tasty-mobile all evening couldn't keep Mr. Tasty from leaving, we say goodnight and farewell.
One look at her